Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm Jamie Adams, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Scorpion. And on behalf of Scorpion, Fishman PR, Fisher Zucker, and franchisors.com, thank you for contributing your time and joining us today. So we've got a few specific goals for today's webinar. The first is to share some valuable insights about how franchisors, franchisees, franchise investors, and suppliers have dealt and continue to deal with this current situation. The second is to bring you actionable information that you can consider implementing immediately in your business or with different suppliers and partners that you work with across your entire network. And then finally, we know that the franchise community is just that, it's a community. And given the current environment, we believe community is more important than ever right now. And we want to use this as an opportunity to create some space and just bring together this franchise community. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat function in GoToWebinar, and we will have someone monitoring that, and we'll try to address as many of those questions as possible. We are recording this webinar, and we will distribute a link and a resource center in the next day or two for the webinar. And we've got a packed schedule, so we're going to jump right in. I'll start by introducing our panelists with us today. We've got Mr. Lane Fisher from Fisher Zucker, Brad Fishman from Fishman PR, John Tezza from NRD Capital, Gary Robbins from Supercuts Franchisee Association, Charlie Chase, the CEO at First Service Brands, and then Sam Balla, CEO at East Coast Swings and Grills. Finally, we also have Mr. Matt Holler, who is Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs. And Matt is going to open our webinar and give us some of the latest updates around the CARE Act. Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to see so many friendly faces across the country here. Great to be with you all. I wish it was under better circumstances, as I know that the entire franchise community is really facing just astronomical challenges on the ground level. And, you know, we at IFA have been working around the clock over the last 3-4 weeks with our politicians, with the administration, with state and local leaders, to try to ensure that relief is not far off, and develop just like the Scorpion team and so many other of our supplier partners are bringing together their clients. We're trying to do that as many times as possible over the course of every day, share best practices and learn about, you know, how we can be helpful to you all. So I think what I'd like to do is just kind of give folks a state of play where we are at 3 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. And late last night, early this morning, about 1 a.m., the United States Senate announced that they had an agreement in principle with the administration and with the Senate Democrats to provide immediate relief for Americans, small businesses, so-called affected industries, and provide additional resources for hospitals and cities and states around the country who are all facing unprecedented challenges right now. In terms of you know, what IFA has been seeking as part of this relief package, kind of want to focus on 2 specific buckets. Number one is the small business interruption loans, or so-called paycheck protection loans, that is a central plank of this CARES Act, which is the bill that the Senate is going to vote on, we hope today, and I'll talk a little bit maybe about process after I talk about some of the substance. But these are essentially loans that will be made available via the Small Business Administration 7A lending program and other qualified lenders. There's around $350 billion being authorized by the United States government to provide these loans to small businesses. And generally, small business loans through the SBA are limited to businesses with 500 or fewer employees. One of the biggest concerns that IFA members have expressed, particularly large multi-unit franchisees like our good friend Gary there, who have more than 500 employees, is that they want to be eligible for these loans too, because what these loans are really designed to do are keep employees connected to businesses who are literally been forced to shutter by virtue of mandated federal or state and local government shutdowns and have no revenue coming in the door right now. And the idea here is to keep employees as connected to employers as possible for the duration of the COVID-19 crisis. So one of the things that IFA was able to get into this bill is a provision that allows any franchise business, franchisor or franchisee, who is currently on the SBA franchise registry to have the size standards waived. So any franchisee or franchisor should be able to take advantage of the Small Business Administration loan program. Now, one of the challenges within the program itself is the overall loan size. So right now, the limits on loan size are 2.5 times a franchisee's average monthly payroll. That is the maximum amount of a loan that you can take, and the loan is capped at $10 million. A lot of franchisees aren't going to get to $10 million, and a lot of franchisees have been telling us that that's not going to be enough to sustain us beyond a month or so because we have lots of other operating costs beyond payroll. So we've heard that concern. We've expressed that to the Senate. The challenge is you're dealing with a limited amount of money that they're willing to put into any of these programs. In order to get that loan size up to where we'd like it to be, which is about 4 times operating costs, it would cost about $800 billion to do so, not just for franchising, but across the entire small business spectrum. So we think this is still a good first start. A lot of the devil is going to be in the implementation of this in terms of how quickly we can get, or the regulations can be written around whatever the Senate ultimately signs into law, which will hopefully happen before the end of this week. The regulations direct the SBA and the Treasury to issue regs within 30 days. I would like to think it will happen much, much sooner because a lot of businesses won't make it 30 days. So that is one of the two central planks. The other central plank of what IFA has been asking for is a Treasury Department-backed lending facility. There is $500 billion authorized in this bill, the CARES Act, for medium and larger businesses who are affected. There's a little bit less detail around exactly how you will demonstrate your ability to qualify for these loans. And these are going to be loans that you're competing for with, much larger businesses. There's some specific money earmarked in there for commercial and cargo airlines. Big contracting companies like Lockheed Martin are also going to be competing in that space. But we have talked to several IFA members about their desire to use the Treasury-backed and Fed-backed facility for higher value loans. So that is something that is included. Just before we got on this webinar, there's some concerning language in there around that the Democrats apparently requested late last night and was agreed to by the White House, that requires you to waive so-called neutrality in a union organizing campaign in exchange for taking money from the federal government. So we obviously would have some concerns with that. It would obviously restrict freedom of speech to communicate with your employees about any so-called activity related to union organizing. So that is a major concern that we have just become aware of in the last hour or so here. So those are two things that we're very focused on. It looks like just another point for our restaurant retail friends, the qualified improvement property issue that was sort of the so-called glitch in the 2017 tax law that would have moved retail and restaurant depreciations onto an accelerated 15-year schedule. That is fixed in this current version of this bill. That'd be a huge win for companies like East Coast Wings, I would think, that do restaurant remodels, your franchisees, if that can get in and help kind of on the backside of this crisis after we can get through kind of the employment and revenue side of it. So those are three things I just wanted to point out. Like I said, the bill is agreed to in principle, but this is a $2 trillion package, and there are a lot of sort of technical issues, and I would argue even substantive issues that are sort of still being addressed today in real time as Senate offices and folks downtown like myself at trade associations and other lobbyists start kind of combing through the actual fine print here. So we're still optimistic this will ultimately happen, but I've been hesitant to share too much on the actual fine print until there's a final version that they will vote on, because there are a lot of problems that still need to be ironed out here today.
Great, Matt. Thanks so much for the update. If you can't stick around, I'm sure there are going to be follow-on questions about this particular subject. I'm going to jump over to you, John. Again, I know that you own several concepts: Ruby Tuesdays, Fuzzy's Taco Shops, and even a supplier or two. Can you talk a little bit about some of the core businesses right now?
Yeah, so we've and Jamie, thanks for doing this. Thanks to everybody who pulled this thing together. Really appreciate this kind of information going out to the industry. We've really approached this in a three-phase process. First phase of it, it was really about trying to understand exactly what was happening and taking a clear-eyed view at what this disruption meant. And the reality is, it's evolved so much since the beginning. I was actually fortunate enough to be with Sam when this was all really breaking, and so I had some pretty clear insight into what he was working on. But it became apparent pretty quickly that this was going from a revenue interruption of some sort to a complete shutdown. And so we took the position that we wanted to get aggressive and get out in front of it. And so we sat down with all of our portfolio companies over about a 3-day period and said, look, we need to plan for what is going to be a drastic and meaningful reduction in revenue. And we don't know how long it's going to be, but we need to put some real downside modeling in place that allows us to understand how long we can go given our current cash reserves. And fortunately, a couple of our portfolio companies and all of our technology companies had really good cash forecasting tools in place. Those that didn't, we drove that process down with them pretty quickly and asked them to then, once we sort of got to work through the revenue implications, to work through what our mechanisms were from a cash perspective. So we really quickly, over the course of about a 3-day period, maybe 5-day period, worked through our management teams, worked through our boards of directors, and were able to put some definitive planning in place that said, we don't know how long we're going to have to run this way, but we think we're going to have to run this way for a period of time. So this is our plan. That unfortunately led to a lot of really tough decisions, but it got us into execution mode pretty quickly. And so over the course of the next couple of days after that, we went through, in some cases, it really didn't mean a whole lot from an organizational standpoint. We were able to maintain the majority of our workforce. In other cases where we've had 100% revenue interruption, it meant a pretty significant reduction in force. But we got through that fairly quickly as well because we had some good cash modeling in place. And then we got into sort of the rest of the new order of execution. We've completely changed our management cadences. We are meeting with our management teams every single week, reviewing those cash forecasts. Our franchisors have completely changed their management cadence with their franchisees. All of our portfolio companies are now having at least 2 times a week conference calls. Some of them are having daily conference calls and reporting out daily on what's going on in the system. So that was sort of step 2, was operationalizing these emergency downside planning. And then phase 3, which fortunately we're into phase 3 now, and to franchisors that are on the phone that are not yet into sort of the latter stages of how they're going to deal with this, like, it's imperative you go out and do it now. No finger wagging, no whatever, right? Everybody gets here the way they got here, but you got to get through this early phase. I think I likened it yesterday to, it's like when the oxygen masks fall on a plane, right? You got to get yours on first, and you can get the oxygen masks of those around you on. So we're now into sort of the respond phase of it, which is really trying to understand, given the realities of what demand is available, how can we go out and try to beat these downside forecasts? And then, so from a demand standpoint, and then the other big part of Respond is that we are now driving these same practices down into our franchise systems. So, the same problems that we have with trying to understand our cash flow reserves and our burn and our runway, given this new reality, our franchisees have those exact same issues. And so we're driving some of these tools through our franchisors, through our FBCs, through our field teams, even in some cases through our franchise advisory councils. We're driving these tools down to the franchisees and giving them the ability to really start to understand what their own personal roadmap looks like. And now we're into respond, right? So we've got companies that are looking at new demand channels, right? New ways of interacting with the guest. We've got companies that are looking at new content, whether it's new internal content that we've spooled up, or in some cases we have brands that are delivering alcohol that have liquor licenses and in states where they're allowed to. We have completely new programming going on around group meals, and we've got some significant exposure to the restaurant business, so we have that ability because for the most part our restaurants are still open to the public, even though our dining rooms are not. So we're employing new and novel pricing strategies on a daily basis. We're looking at dynamic pricing. We're looking at our discount strategies and how to add penny profit, if not efficiently, at least we can add penny profit. And then we're looking at things like menu optimization and new media strategies. And so we're very much, our portfolio companies are very much into the respond phase of this at this point.
That's awesome. And John, can you hear me okay? I just want to validate that I'm coming. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that insight. I want to come back and maybe ask another question or two in a second. I do want to see if we can get Gary on. If maybe we can try Gary's audio one more time. Still struggling with Gary. Lane, are you there by chance? Can we hear you?
I hope so. Can you still hear me?
There we go. I can hear you okay, Lane. So Lane, from a legal perspective, can you talk a little bit about how you see this issue impacting franchise sales, both for the established concepts and for emerging brands?
Yeah, I see it affecting franchise sales. In a short answer, I think there's been some confusion around whether any of the dates that existed historically have been extended, and the answer is no. We'll need to have updated documentation by the end of the month under the FTC rule, which is not changed. Registrations, the deadlines are unchanged. In the postcard states, they're unchanged. Maryland has extended a filing deadline, but it's sort of a distinction with no difference because you still can't sell them in Maryland until you're actually registered. People think that the deadlines. So I think we'll be able to operate as long as they have an current audit in non-registration states. In the registration states, people are projecting delays. Actually, additional fees for people if their documents lapse, which I think some people are considering. But if you let your registration lapse, you're now a new filing and behind all the renewals and all the new filings that were before you. So it could have the effect of putting you out of that state for some period of time. Now, I think it depends on how valuable or how exclusionary the rule turns out to be is really based on your financials and how much they've deteriorated over 19 years from income recognition or other rules that may quite obviously require or be likely that the state requires you to have some sort of financial accommodation, which will have you not receiving the initial fees. And I question that really does change a franchisor's cash flow if it no longer can accept fees in registration states. And so people need to be sensitive to what those changes do. But I think it's a new world order. I know that there's been a lot of changes at franchisors and a lot of extensive downside demand modeling and a lot of changes. I think folks still need to identify someone who will be in charge of their registrations as they're going out of business. They'll be a franchisor, and we continue to receive materials and file them every day, even through this remote new remote model. But it's going to be interesting. I think by and large, people will likely register. There's still even some other issues that related to item 19. Item 19 was the one thing that if it changed at the closing table, if and it was a material change, you had to amend. And I think while everybody's units are closed, I don't know exactly what that status is, but we have to be revisited. I know IFA is all over this in terms of trying to prod the FTC and states into giving some definitive answers, but at the moment we're operating under the belief that the dates will remain unchanged and that we'll need to get everybody's documents turned around before May 1st. And regardless of how remote a sale might be, there might be a transfer, might be other things, but if any of your sales that were on the bubble suddenly come back, people are going to be devastated if they don't have documents to actually close one of these deals. And since, to the extent that most of our clients still have retained some of their development people, they sort of still need documents to work on. So, and I'm sorry that that's the answer, because I thought there would be some extension that would cure everything. But at the end of the day, our disclosure law is to protect the investor, and it's based on disclosure of all the material facts that are required to be disclosed. And it's hard to imagine that anyone will buy on 2018 information. Your new updated document will only have 2019 information, and certainly things have changed in 2020. So now I've answered your question, Jamie. You disappeared from the screen. Oh, Brad. Hey.
Yeah, and I can kind of help lay out, not help them, but kind of discussion. And I'm on the phone with people every single day hearing about it. The good news is some deals are still getting done. Believe it or not, deals are getting done. I've talked to people that got deals done this week. And so, but as all of us don't know how long this is going to last for, we still have to prepare for the other side. You want to make sure you have the funding lined up, the real estate thing. The competitors beat them to the punch. And as I tell everybody, there is going to be phenomenal opportunities with lead development and franchise development. And as I just had a discussion with a lot of people, and the comparison I had to was like the Homestead, the Gold Rush. Remember back in the 1800s where everyone is standing at the starting line? And now the question is, you got to know where you're going. You got to be prepared for this, when it's going to do. There's going to be a lot of people without jobs, layoffs, and then the franchising opportunities are going to be there. And in every opportunity, there comes really comes the great chance to take a small system or a medium system and make it huge, because concepts are really going to make it. Really have an idea. This, I can tell you what the way we're addressing this is, where we have to adjust our messaging based on the current status of the franchise system, how the brand is handling the situation with respect to COVID-19. Are they open? Are they going to have a product that's not there? Messaging how the dedication of the franchisor to supporting the franchisees. There, as we're hearing from everybody on a lot of the seminars that have gone on, there's some franchisors that are doing a phenomenal job. There's lots of concepts that are still open. There's going to be cleaning concepts that are going to do that. A good friend of mine is a franchisee of Cycle Bar. They rented out their bicycles to people so they don't lose their membership. There are going to be phenomenal opportunities. You're going to have the feel-good stories of the franchisor supporting for the local community. Franchisees, doing whatever they're going to do. Brand development. So there's going to be lots of opportunities, and you want to make sure you know where you're going. Everyone, for the most part, is home right now. Online stories, blogging, talking about those type of scenarios where you're really helping the system, and people are going to be reading about these stories for the near future. So there's a huge opportunities in the franchise development.
Yeah, Brad, that's great, and you're right. This is definitely a time for innovation. We're seeing some of the same things at Scorpion right now with a lot of our franchise clients. We're working on new innovative marketing and advertising strategies, both at a national level and even at a franchisee level. Things and messaging that we would not have probably thought to even try a couple of weeks ago that we're trying and we're seeing some success with. And then, I'll just add to that. I think we're also seeing for certainly for concepts where the businesses are still operable, and this would go for a lot of the service-based brands that are still considered essential. We're actually seeing a lot of opportunity to continue to drive inbound leads and revenue at a much cheaper cost than just a week or two ago. And in some cases, we're actually seeing lead cost on search engines like Google and Bing, and even social platforms like Facebook. We're seeing 50% decreases in certain markets. So if you have the means and you can still power through this scenario from a marketing and advertising perspective, and you can still you're still open for business, definitely would encourage you to consider continue to double down in your marketing and advertising efforts. Gary, by chance, do we have you in a place where you can hear and talk now? Let's try this one more time for Gary. Still nothing on the Gary front. Sam, if you wouldn't mind, can you talk a little bit about how you're handling landlord relations and rent, and how you're also advising your franchisees to handle any bank loans that are due at the first of the month? That was a question that came in from our audience.
Well, that's ironic you said that, because that's what I was doing just now while they were talking. But yes, we put out a strategy 4 or 5 days ago to our franchisees, and basically what you need to do for the franchisee is swing for the fence, right? I mean, we formed a letter for them to use. They just put in their ownership, and of course in our system everything is digitally filed, so we're able to pull up when they were not able to get to it from their load at the unit level, their lease information, and help them. But you put in the ownership, you put in the property management company. The form letter basically says, hey, for the next 90 days, we need a free rent. We are willing to pay you pass-through economics, right? CAM tax, insurance, etc. And for the duration of the year, based on what the DC is telling us, we need the rest of the year at 50% rent abatement or deferral. So we're asking for abatement in the second part of that ask, and we're asking for the first part of the ask to be a complete deferral. So in other words, you're just going to lose it. Don't stick it into the back end of the leasing program for us. So we're right now about maybe 65% through our franchise system as far as having landlords comply with some sort of reaction. Of course, swinging for the fence, trying to get a 90 days of free rent on the base rent has not been 100% successful, but we've had 100% to date landlord participation in some kind of fashion. So what we really want to see is we want to see at least a 50% deferral of the base rent in the 90 days, and then some play in the rest of the year. We're asking for 100% for the first 90 days, and we're asking for 50% for the remainder of 2020. Now, keep in mind that the key thing is for us, we feel like the franchisee has a break-even model that we built last week, based on what we went to as far as takeout and curbside only, as John alluded to with his brands in the food space. So our franchisees are getting every 2 days updates of their location on what they look like at the model, if they should be green or red for that 2-day run. So we're going 48 hours at a time right now. And we're using that data for the landlord packaging. So we sent out to the landlords a form letter from the brand disclosing what we have done in royalty abatement and national marketing fund changes. So we have taken our changes for 90 days to the franchisee already. So we're giving the landlord basically no out to say, hey, you're a franchisee of the big franchisor that has all the money in the world. What are they doing for you? So we diluted that debate with the landlords last week to not have that be a position of stance. And then this week, the franchisees are sending out the form letter on the ask. So that was kind of the strategy we put together last Wednesday.
That's super helpful. John, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
No, I think Sam nailed it. His organization is incredibly financially and data driven, and so it's not difficult for Sam to pull those tools off. I think for a lot of franchisors, they might be scrambling to help their franchisees do that. But I think going to the landlord and going to your debt provider, your lender, and saying that you need some sort of assistance is critical. It's a non-negotiable at this point. Having that unit level or enterprise level, if you're a multi-unit franchisee, short-term cash forecast in hand is a critical component to that. they have to be able to articulate to a landlord, this is exactly what's happened in my business, or to a lender, this is exactly what's happened in my business. So, you know, if you get, Sam's organization is doing all the right things, right? The form letter, the letter to the landlord, you know, I think we'd all love to be at that level. If you do one thing as a franchisor to help your franchisee, it's help them put a short-term cash forecast model in place that they can articulate to their partners exactly what's happening in their business.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Gary, do we have you yet? Can we try one more time?
I don't know. Do you have me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. There we go. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Great. I want to comment just on some of the things I heard there. Just give you of course, the franchisee perspective, which always is a little bit different. You know, I'm holding off on contacting my landlords because I don't know the extent of the problem right now. You know, 7 or 8 days ago, I was going to reach out for my landlords in a, you know, positive, constructive fashion and just said, hey, you know, we have this situation, let's talk about it. 3 days later, the letter would have been, hey, you know, we're not paying rent. And now today, you know, the letter might be, hey, we're not paying rent for 2 months. So it's a little bit too fluid for me now to reach out to the landlords in a constructive way. I don't know, especially, you know, even if we open in May or April or whatever, I don't think the ramp up is going to be right away. So I can't reach out for them and come up with a solution right now because it's too unknown for me. I think it's a lot of franchisees have been asking me. I think it's a personal choice for a lot of franchisees whether they want to reach out for their landlords or not. But yeah, certainly we're having a lot of conversation and a lot of thought around how we're going to approach the landlord situation. Circling back earlier to what Sam had said, you know, I think this is a time for bold leadership from the franchisees and especially the franchisors to keep our human energy moving forward in a positive direction. Yeah, we're dealing with all the managerial and tactical things of shutting down the business and dealing with the unemployment claims and all those other things that go along with kind of shutting us down. But I have to lead the company and keep the human energy moving forward in a positive direction. I'm looking for the franchisors and our brand leadership to do that same thing. I mean, if they're a nervous captain, it's going to be a nervous crew going forward. I'm not talking about the leadership like you're the guy in the World War I trenches who blows the whistle and everybody goes over the trench edge and gets shot by a machine gun. I'm talking about the franchisees are kind of standing on the corner of the intersection right now, and we're looking in both directions, and we're not sure whether we cross the street or whether we go now. There's that guy that comes along, looks both ways, and then crosses, and so then everybody follows them. So I think leadership is really important to get us out and start working on our plans to re-engage the business. Our number one priority is going to be getting our employees back. Number two is getting our guests back. And number three is really dealing with the landlords, the banks, and the vendors. From a franchisee perspective, I know there are a lot of competing priorities from the franchisor perspective, but and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just telling you what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
I want to stay on you just a second because we've obviously had some audio problems. I appreciate you hanging in there. There was one question that we did get from a registrant, which is a difficult question, but I know you've got experience in this, and I'd love to give you an opportunity to provide some feedback.
Sure.
And the question was, what advice do you have for franchisees who are hesitant to lay off workers for fear of losing good people, but are concerned for their cash flow? What should be considered in the decision?
Yeah, it's a challenging situation, and I think in this case, I'm going to speak from my experience, not from my opinion and what we're doing. Look, you got to be brilliant at basic stuff. We're engaging with them while they're furloughed on our Facebook and other communication channels. I mean, engaging them today is table stakes in dealing with your employees. If you haven't been rewarding, kind of engaging and recognizing them, someone else will. You probably will lose them. So I'm not saying it's too late to start, but engaging with them while they're furloughed is a basic that you have to be doing. as John was saying, I think cash budgets are critical to being able to make objective decisions about what you can and can't do for your people to kind of remove that fear and that uncertainty. And then, again, leadership of planning. What's the plan to get them back? What does that look like? I think, we're planning now, and the plan may end up being worthless, but going through the process, I think would remove some of that uncertainty and that fear. And I think this is where, culture comes into play, the culture of your organization, as to whether you've been engaging with your people. We in our organization practice optimism and gratitude to them all the time, because if all you ever do is come to them with problems, they see you as the problem. So I think our culture is going to be give us a lot of foundation to get our great people back. I'm worried about getting our great people back, but we're executing on the basics and to make those decisions, and certainly engaging with them and having a plan for getting them back as soon as possible.
Great. Thanks, Gary. And I appreciate just our interaction and your leadership over the last few days. Charlie,
thanks for having me on,
you mentioned, absolutely. Charlie, you mentioned the scale of First Service Brands, and I'm sure you've dealt with similar scenarios. What advice or feedback would you have as a CEO on how to have these tough conversations and around employment situations right now?
I'm going to go to over communicating by a factor of 10. We're not furloughing people because we don't like them, which is why they might think they're being furloughed. We're furloughing people because we're utilizing a bank that is out of our control, but we know works, which is unemployment by state or by province. We're going to keep their health care. So we are committing to who they are and what they are, but we are very transparent that if we have to operate as franchise. So I've been a franchisee, so I'm sort of speaking from Gary's concept here. It's a bank source for us, for our people, because we've kind of looked at this as we're not shutting down, we're scaling down. So we have 3 phases. The first phase is scaling down. Then you have the interstitial, where you're sheltering in place or whatever the term is, and you may have a partial scaling down, but then we want to scale up and come out of the water quickly. So you need cash to do this, you need cash to do this, and you really need cash to restart. And what I find is that people constantly underestimate how much money or cash they need to restart their business. So as Gary said, 3 weeks ago, we started our conversations. I was just going through my book. It was March 1st, actually February 27th. We had to have conversations around whether we were going to cancel big franchise events. And March 1st, we started canceling events. And so we've had task forces running just like Sam has. And right now we have 7 concurrent task forces running. And they're for everything from corporate communications and how to have a webinar, how to use Zoom effectively, and things such as what is the customer-facing communication, what's the staff-facing, what's the franchisee-facing, and we have something for subsidies, and we have so we have all these task forces. I think somebody can correct me, but I think we've had 9 of them total, or 11 of them, and everything that we're doing is about context. We're focusing on the staff in the field, like Gary was talking about. You've laid off a lot. You've furloughed, Gary, a lot of people, but they love you. You love them, and you can't afford. It's not that you, Gary Robbins, can't afford. The business can't have this happen. I mean, who plans for this? Nobody.
Yeah. So
you avail yourself of unemployment insurance. It is a source of funding for your people. It keeps them. It's a very good on-ramp for our people to get money. We keep in touch with them by a factor of 10. I have this written all over my house. There's 3 words I have. Agility, accuracy, and transparency. And those 3 words are imperative We have to be agile. We know that things are changing day to day. As Matt said a couple of minutes ago, there are things that, there's some trash that's been thrown into this legislation that either it comes out or companies won't avail themselves of the funds, right? So everything is evolving. So agility is very important. Number two is accuracy. It's around data. And Gary is a very clear example, and so was Sam. You have things digitally. You can react quickly. You know what you have to do. And then the last thing is transparency. You don't keep anyone in the dark. It's horrible right now Gary's people cut my hair. See, very nice job. And I would hate like heck for the people that cut my hair to not know that they were coming back to work as soon as Gary can put them in the store. And they need to know that. But, and no offense, maybe Gary's a really, really wealthy guy, but he needs that money to restart his business because his business is dead in the water when it's closed down. And Gary has never closed something down, right? That's just not what we do. Right. So as a franchisor, we also own franchises, we have to see the context from every level. So bottom up is the way we started, top down, and somewhere in the middle, the cash has to work. Sorry about the long-winded answer, but I wanted to share that.
No, that was great, and I love the very specific advice you gave around agility, accuracy, and transparency. Brad, do you have anything to add around this particular topic?
Yeah, and this is really, as both, Gary, Charlie, Sam, and John have all talked about communications. And everybody, you want your franchisor to beat expectations. And as we're talking about right now, how long this is going to last. It's going to last 2 weeks, 3, whatever the number is going to be. We are going to have to relaunch and get everybody open. So you mentioned haircuts. I'm sure within if nothing opens for 3-4 weeks, people need to get their haircuts. And, my wife's going to freak out if she doesn't get her manicure. And so you got to think about this. So getting people, you want to communicate, knowing, but, half your people right now are dealing with crisis mode. But the next thing got to be thinking about when we're opening, how we're going to get them up. And, we hear about all types of things. You're looking at that curve right now. And, Charlie used, and I took this down, I heard him speak last week, scale down. But the most importantly, how are we going to scale up fast? Because everyone is going to be waiting there. And by the time we're going to be sitting through here, we're going to be sitting in restaurants. I can't wait to get back to a restaurant. And so this is what we're really going to have to do is have your people being prepared to get, customers are what's going to make this for everything. By the checks that, we're talking about checks coming in May, it's going to be a pent up demand. And, a lot of the franchise systems out there have the membership model. So how do we get those people signed up for products and services they really want? And so we're working with everybody to really get that out there. But the people who are ready to relaunch or scale up openings, whatever it's going to be, are the ones who are going to win and succeed in this game.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's great. That's great, Brad. So we're coming up on time. Before we do let everyone go, I just want to ask all of our folks to leave just one piece of feedback. If there's one piece of advice they could leave, and I'll start because I'm putting everybody on the spot. At Scorpion, we've got just north of 800 employees that we've had to quickly shift from a work in office to work remote state. And I can tell you that that the one thing that is getting us through is mindset and culture. And several of us watched a John Maxwell presentation in the last couple of days on leadership in a crisis. And he says that everything rises and falls on leadership, even in a crisis. And we're doing things like overly communicating. We're having daily calls with our leadership team on Zoom, and daily what we call mojo meetings with different parts of our organization. And we're just trying to drive this attitude of controlling what we can control, and being others focused. Others for us is our clients, and trying to help out where we can. So, Sam, I know any piece of final just feedback that you could leave the audience here today.
I would say that honest, clear, daily communication with your franchisee centered around the cash flow modeling, of your benchmarks and KPIs that you've created the last 6 or 7 days every day. They have to be heard from the franchisor every day. We talk to them in the morning and we talk to them at 8:30 at night. We split all the stores up between 3 or 4 people, 5 people. Everybody's got their list. The franchisees need to know and have faith that we're there working as hard as we can behind the scenes for their best interest.
Thanks, Sam. Charlie, over to you. Any final thoughts?
I think I've said enough. I just want everyone to remember context. If you can't move into someone else's shoes in a crisis, you can't lead.
Great advice. John, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think look, we know this is going to end. We don't know when it's going to end. There's actually some, if you look at the day over day incident rate, like you're starting to maybe see the beginning of the flattening of the curve. So there's some green shoots in that regard, but we know it's going to end. And if for you, for your franchisees, for all of us, if we can survive through that, we're going to come out the other end really, really strong. We know there's going to be supply constraint, and so taking this time to become a stronger brand, I think, is really important. We're starting to talk about it internally, almost like going into chrysalis. And there's some brands that are completely shut down right now. They are literally at zero revenue, and there's others that are that they've actually seen this as a boon to their business. But irrespective of what side of that spectrum you fall on, during this period, there's an opportunity to have to evolve your brand quickly. And yeah, it's tough. Yes, there's pain everywhere, but this is also an opportunity to grow as an organization, and so look for those opportunities.
Great. Thanks, John. Lane, any parting words?
Yeah, hey, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think there's been great advice on the call, and this is a world where business advice prevails over legal advice every time. And I encourage people to be creative and adaptive, to not lose sight of who they were or who their culture is, because that is what's going to bring your customers and your employees back. Caution everybody to go through the kind of cash flow analysis that John and Charlie and others have suggested, in terms of, from as a franchisor first, that you're able to provide essential services, and that there's a company that will emerge out of the back end, and that folks manage their cash. I think the communication advice has been great. I think you can't too much. I think some people are afraid that they don't have all the answers, and I think Gary and others and John have convinced me that it is really just, you're the ray of hope. You need to have a vision of what the other side will look like, and if you do, the crew will follow the captain. And if you don't, people will begin to take their own personal action. There'll be no uniformity among how people react to things, and very little predictability about how folks come out. So I just wish everybody luck and hope that they stay safe and healthy. But that's all I have, Jim.
Thanks, Lane. Brad?
Number one, I'd really like to thank the IFA, the staff at the IFA and the leadership, people like John and Charlie and Sam and everything out there, because right now, and this really shows franchising is a community, and all of us are in the same boat. We're all going to go through this together. But as I tell people, it's going to get off your butt. We're going to walk, we're going to jog, and ready to run, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities out there, and don't give up. We're all going through this together. Many of us are going through, and I'll tell you, we had to furlough some employees, and it's very difficult. We've never had to do that now. We've been around since 1991, and it was very hard for Sherry and I to furlough people. We've never done it, but we believe in this, and believe in the franchising industry, and like everything else, we're going to succeed with this just like we always do.
Thanks, Brad. And then Gary, would love to end with your final thoughts.
Thanks, Jamie. Echo a lot of what was been said, but I agree. There's opportunity when we reopen. There's going to be pent-up demand, fewer and weakened competitors. people are going to want to re-socialize and reconnect. Those are the opportunities. The challenges are we're going to have a skittish public. In my business, we have seniors and high-risk people kind of waiting it out a little bit longer. I do fear that some of the government programs may be over-rewarding non-work a little too much and a little too long. So I'm a little bit concerned about that and losing good people. So there's the opportunities and the challenges. And leadership needs to work on those plans now and not later and get the human energy moving forward productively and positively.
I don't think we could end with better thoughts than that, Gary. Thanks so much. And to our panelists, thank you again for taking time out to prepare for this and to answer these questions today. Thank you for hanging in with us as we had some issues with the GoToWebinar platform. I'm sure that it's being used in the masses across the country and probably the world today. And to our audience that did join, we have several hundred of you today. We'll go through the audio recording. We will provide the recording so long as it comes through in a audible format, and we'll certainly transcribe as much as we can for distribution as well. We're going to continue to look for opportunities to provide updates. And again, on behalf of Scorpion, Fishman PR, Fisher Zucker, franchisors.com, and certainly all the organizations represented today, thank you so much for taking the time to join. We wish you well. Our thoughts and positive vibes and prayers are with you all. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye, guys.